Before we start this video, a large thank you to Canner, Mingyang, a name I unfortunately cannot pronounce. Thank you for the support, my friend. JP, Devian, Guy Cage, and One for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. And an immense thank you to Halo Burner for their continued support of the channel this month on Patreon. As always, it is greatly appreciated, my friend, and I hope you enjoy the video. Hello everybody, and today we're going to make it so we're actually going to be able to two-hand the weapon. It's going to play the right animations and we can on-two-hand the weapon, etc, etc. And we're going to set up our blend trees as well for our blocking and our locomotion animations. So let's go to two-hand right weapon. And the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to do these comments here in order. And I think I forgot one of the comments, so we'll see in a sec. So we're going to check if we're using the unarmed weapon by referencing the world item database and then seeing if the weapon is in fact the unarmed weapon. And if it is, we're just going to send a return. You can also check for the ID if you have specific items you want to check for, or you just want to use the ID instead of the actual weapon. That's fine too. Then we're going to say if the player is the owner, we're going to set is two-handing right weapon and is two-handing weapon values to false. We have to check for owner here because remember we are going to call all three of these functions if we're not the owner, because this is what we're going to use to actually move around the weapons and set up the animation controllers and stuff like that. So number two, if we are returning, basically disable the bool status, reset it. And then right here, place the non-two-hand weapon model in the back or the hip slot. So the back slot, we're going to use that. And this doesn't exist yet, but we're going to make a function called place weapon model in unequipped slot. So we're going to make this require, what does it require? Well, the weapon model, of course. And then we're going to make it require a player for the future. Basically, we're going to use this to discern the player's chest equipment, and we're going to move the weapon further or closer to the back, depending on how big their chest equipment is. But that's not needed right now. Don't worry about that. We're also going to use the class of a weapon, which doesn't exist yet. And we're going to use this class to determine where on the back or how it's placed. So don't worry about that chest equipment bit. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I'll just make a note for now. So let's go to enums and add an enum for weapon class. So basically, if you want to make more than one slot, let's say you want a hip slot for your smaller weapons and a back slot for your larger weapons, you can assign which slot they go to when they're unequipped based on a weapon class. So that helps really organize all that. Weapon classes will be used for other things in the future too, but this is the first thing we're going to use them for, and it's really good just to organize them by class regardless. So for example, maybe you don't want a dagger on your back, you want it on your hip, but you want a shield be on your back. We can use the weapon class to kind of sort where this goes. So under the weapon item script, I'm going to make a header for weapon class. Let's make a public weapon class and call it weapon class. I'm actually going to put that right below weapon model, so the model stuff is together and the class thing is separate. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the weapon model instantiation slot, and I'm going to make that function that we discussed just now. So public void unequip, what I call a place weapon model in unequipped slot. And then I'm going to make it require a game object for the weapon model, as I said. The weapon class, which we're referencing from the specific weapon. And then the player itself. Alright, so let's start writing the functionality. So we have the weapon model, the weapon class, and the player. The first thing we want to do here is kind of discern some logic in how we're going to actually position this on the back itself. So it's going to be different for every weapon, basically, depending on the class. And also, we can make a note here to move the weapon on the back closer to our character or more further outward, depending on the chest model. So this is what Elden Ring actually does. You'll notice that if you equip a big piece of armor, the anchor point is actually much closer to your back, or further away from your back rather than if you had no armor on at all. So this is easily done just by getting the relative position of the weapon and then moving it closer or further away. So the next thing we're going to do is say current weapon model is equal to weapon model, as in the weapon model we're passing. And then we're going to say weapon model.transform.parent is equal to transform. And then we're going to say switch. And what we're going to do here now is switch the weapon class. So we can just basically change the rotation and position based on the class. And this is just going to take some trial and error. Now you can keep a custom rotation and position on each weapon if you'd like, but I find classes are similar enough where you can kind of get away with putting it in the same place. It's entirely up to you though. So I'm just going to paste these numbers there. These are not going to work. Just saying if you're copying these right now, they're from Nephilim, but we use a kind of weird anchoring system for our weapons. So I'm going to have to change these when we go into the game. But I'm also going to go back now to two-hand right weapon and fix that function name because I forgot to put the in unequipped and save that. All right, so we're going to have to go into the game and test this, but before I do that, I'm going to go to the player prefab, and I'm actually going to add in my back slot by going to the spine, and you can just lay it here, but I like creating a new empty game object for it, just so it's very clear where it is, and I'm just going to call this back slot. Again, we add the weapon model instantiation slot. I'm going to pull it out here just so it's right there, so there's less movement I have to do to actually change on the weapons, but you can see it's just right on my back, right where it leaves the model's edge. I'm going to save that. All right, let's go back over the script here. I'm going to get rid of all these numbers here, and I'm going to add in a line of code that will switch the animator controller to the two-handed weapon. So we're going to do that by saying player.playerAnimatorManager.update animator controller, and we're going to pass the weapon that we're currently two-handing. Since this is two-hand right weapon, we're going to pass player.playerInventoryManager.current right-hand weapon. And we're going to pass the weapon animator. All right, cool. So we have the animator. I'm going to make a comment here for this now just so it's clear. Update the current animator to the current two-handed weapons animator. So we have a check for returning if we can't two-hand the weapon. That's great. We have the animator being updated. If we pass that check, we're putting our unequipped weapon into the back slot. So what do we need to do next? Well, we're going to add the two-hand strength bonus. We're not going to do that right now, but I'm going to make a comment. And then we're going to place the two-hand weapon model in the main hand. So what we're going to do is go right-hand slot, because that's the main hand. And then we're going to do, basically, what did I call that function? Load weapon. We're going to change the name of that. Load weapon, and since this is the two-hand right weapon, we're going to use the right-hand model. So basically, if we were two-handing the left weapon, we use the left-hand model, but it will be going in the right-hand slot. This just makes the animations easier, so you don't need two different blend trees. You just use the one two-hand animation set and put your two-handed weapon always in the right hand. So that's good. Now right below that, I'm just going to actually change that name right now. Place weapon model into slot is what I'm going to change that to, so it kind of matches the other one, place weapon model into unequipped slot. Okay, so we can copy all of this right now and then paste it in the two-hand left weapon function. We're going to change it a little bit because it's just two-handing our left weapon is to the right, obviously. So I'm just going to paste all this in here like so, and now we're going to check for still the unarmed weapon. We're going to compare it to our left-hand weapon now. And then we're going to say is two-handing the left weapon as false, so we fail to check. We're going to switch our animator controller to our left-hand weapon animator. We're going to place the right weapon in the back slot. And we're going to reference our right weapon's weapon class. And finally, we're going to place the left weapon model still in the right-hand slot. All right, cool. Looks good. I think that's it for now. So let's save this. We can pretty much jump in game soon. Oh, I said 2 instead of 2. That's funny. All right, I'm going to save this now. We can pretty much jump in game soon and see if we can position these weapons in the back the proper way. And now the on two-hand weapon, we can fill this out too while we're here actually. So we can test both at the same time. We can say player.playerAnimatorManager, update animator controller. And if you're on two-handing your weapon, it's always going to go back to your main hand weapon's animator controller. So that will be your current right-hand weapon animator. Then we have to remove the strength bonus. So we don't have the strength effect yet, so we'll leave that for now. Untwo-hand the model and move the model that isn't being two-handed back to its proper hand, if there is any at all. All right, so we're going to say if player.playerInventoryManager.current left weapon weapon model type is equal to weapon model type weapon, else if, and then we're going to reference one for our shield. And the reason why we're doing this is because, remember, they are in different parented positions depending on their weapon model instantiation type. So we're going to say if it is a weapon, then we're going to say left hand weapon slot dot place weapon model into slot left weapon model, and if it's a shield, we place it back into our shield slot. And this is for those weapon pivot reasons for getting its alignment to properly work, if you don't recall. Okay, so that's good. I'm going to make a comment over this now, just saying basically that this is for the left hand. And then right below that, I'm going to make another comment for the right hand. So we're just going to reset both our left and right hand weapons here. Because if you're on two-handing the weapon, it doesn't matter if you're on two-handing for the right or left. The logic can be applied universally. So we're going to say right hand slot dot place weapon model into slot, and we pass the right hand model. So there's only one slot for a right hand, so that's all we need. Now I'm going to rename the right hand slot to right hand weapon slot, just to keep the naming conventions the same with left hand weapon slot, left hand shield slot. and then refresh the damage collider calculations. So we can say right weapon manager, set weapon damage, and again, just pass all the normal stuff you would when loading your right weapon on your hand. So we're going to pass the player, and then the player inventory manager dot current right hand weapon. Do the same thing with your left-handed weapon. We do this because we're actually taking away the strength bonus. We don't have that applied yet. So you would lose out on some scaling bonuses when you're no longer two-handing your weapon, which would be a little bit of damage. And for this reason too, we actually want to apply this calculation when we two-hand the weapon again. So let's paste this down here. Now again, this isn't going to change anything currently, but when we add in that two-hand strength bonus, it will. And the difference will be much more noticeable if your strength level is higher and the weapon you're using has a higher strength scaling. We don't have strength scaling on our weapons yet either, so that will come in the future. So on is two-handing weapon changed, we're going to say if we're not two-handing the weapon, we're also going to say if we are the owner, we're going to change is two-handing right weapon and is two-handing left weapon to false. And then we're going to call player.onTwoHand weapon, which we already have down there. Perfect. So is two-handing left weapon dot value is equal to false. Is two-handing right weapon dot value is equal to false. Now I accidentally put two parents here under the place weapon on equip slot. You don't want to do that, otherwise you take the whole slot and put it in the other slot like you can see here. So that is a mistake. Don't put parent down twice. I am going to go to my my inputs here and lower the time needed to hold the weapon to two-handed, because I find 0.5 is much too long and I find myself accidentally attacking sometimes. So if I go back into the game here now and hold the two-hand button and then press the button to properly put it in place, yes, you can see I am two-handing the right weapon, so the left weapon goes on my back. So there it is again. You actually can't see which weapon I'm switching out because these are exactly the same. So just for the visual sake, I will use a shield, or shield and sword. So again, if I two-hand the sword, you can see the shield goes on my back. If I two-hand the shield, you can see the sword goes on my back. So that's working as intended. There are no animations yet, so nothing else really happens, but they're all going to the proper slots. So we can actually use this now to actually get a proper rotation and a position for the items you want to two-hand. So for example, the shield, I don't want it to be sideways. So if I go to the main shield itself, you want to go to the main object itself. That's what we're setting, not the weapon pivot, but the actual main top object. And kind of rotate it and position it to where you like it. So that looks pretty good. I won't spend too much time on this, but I encourage you to spend some time on it to get how you like it. Now go and just take all the position and the rotation values and place them in here just like so. And make sure you go to your item and set its weapon class. So this is a medium shield. And then, you know, with your spear, your straight sword, yada, yada, yada. So it knows which value to assign all these. So I won't do all these on video. I'll save you guys some time. I'm also going to make fist weapon. So if you have any fist weapons, they can get their own too. Now if I go back in the game, you can see here, boom, it goes on my back. Just as I wanted it and had it set up before I made all those alterations. So do the same thing with all of your weapons, and this will take some time if you have more weapon classes, obviously, but it's nice to get them all looking proper. Okay, so let's go over to our blend trees now. Let's drag in, or drag back rather, our old two-handed blend trees, which probably have nothing. And now since I have done this a bunch before, I won't go through me putting in every animation, but I'll show all the transitions. So we want to make a transition from the one-hand idle to the two-handed idle. And we just want to check for if is moving is equal to false. Make sure you have no exit time. And then we're going to check for is two-handing, which doesn't exist yet. So let's go ahead and make that. Let's add a new bool. Is two-handing weapon. Now if is two-handing weapon is true and is moving is false, then we're going to go to this idle two-hand position. Now also just make a transition back. Again, onTick has exit time, and just make all of the interactions or conditions the same, except we're not two-handing now. So if we're not moving and we're not two-handing, go back to the one-handed. So you can see where this is going. I'm just basically putting in these transitional states here, making sure onTick has exit time every single time. And what you want to do is just put in your two-hand animation. Now the unarmed weapon can't be two-handed, so I'm just going to use straight sword as my default. You can use whatever you want. And then the transitions from two-handed idle to two-handed locomotion are exactly the same as one-handed idle to one-handed locomotion. So you just want to check for if you are moving. And honestly, make sure you check for, you probably don't even need to check for if you're two-handing a weapon if you set it up so you play the two-handed animation when you two-hand a weapon. But I'm going to make everything work as it should using the animator or state machine. And you might miss a few things, have to come back here. You might see some of your transitions aren't working as properly, but you can catch it. Just look at what transition is not working and come and adjust the conditions accordingly. This falls into the category kind of like visual scripting, which I'm not a massive fan of. I prefer doing everything I can with a script. But for something like the animator, this is pretty cool, and it is convenient just to set all these transitions up as they are. So I'm going to untick as exit time. I'm going to keep saying that on all these. Keep saying it too so I don't forget myself. I'm going to drag in these two blocking state sets here, the blend tree for the locomotion and then the state for the idle. I'm going to fill those in as well. I'm going to make the transitions, again, just basically mirror what you were doing for the one-handed, just add in the two-handed check. And if you want to be overkill, you could add transitions back to the, like you don't need to add a transition from the blocking two-handed to blocking one-handed, because when you two-hand a weapon, you stop blocking. And when you un-two-hand a weapon, you stop blocking. You know what I'm saying? So it's going to reset your position on the animations anyway. So you could make this third transition here like so, and then you could add, some conditions for is moving and is blocking and is two-handing weapon. But you don't really need to do that. I'm going to show you why. So don't worry about that. These two transitions should be enough now. We can test it further, and we can add more as we need. So I'm just going to not add 3 for the rest of these. But you can have it here if you want to be super overkill. All right, so I'm just going to finish making these transitions now from the blocking idle and blocking locomotion. And then we're going to do the two-handed idle to the two-handed blocking idle. And that should be enough. So it should still be pretty simple by the time we're done. And I'm looking at mine here too in Nephilim right now. And I have I have all these, and I have some for crouching and some for walking around and aiming a bow while you're moving. And it still isn't all that complex. I've only got 2 transitional arrows most of the time from all these going to each other, and I don't find there's any issues. So I am going to go now from blocking idle two-handed weapon to blocking locomotion two-handed weapon. So we're going to check for is moving, is two-handing weapon, and is blocking. Again, on tick has exit time. I'm just going to leave that third transition there so it's not there. And I am going to drag us over here now and go from idle two-handed weapon to blocking idle two-handed weapon. And we're going to check for is two-handing weapon is true and is blocking is true. Again, on ticking has exit time. And we're going to make sure that we're not moving. All right, I'm going to go back from here like so. And then I'm going to simply say is moving is false. And then we're going to say is two-handing weapon is true. And then we're going to say is blocking is false. All right, so I'm probably going to have to come back and edit these because you never get them all right the first time. So make sure you add that toggle blocking controller to the same states that you would have on your one hand for your two hands. So for me, it's blocking locomotion and blocking idle. So I'm going to add it to blocking locomotion two-hand and blocking idle two-hand. So that looks good. Okay, going to now drop in my idle animations for blocking. And then we're going to do the blend trees. So the blend trees are simple, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it because we've already covered it in an episode. You just want to fill in all possible variations of movement for forward, backward, left, and right for walking and running, and combinations of all of them. So if we go in here, I believe there's 8 for each set for walking and running for 16 total. And if you want to have the 0-0 position, it's 17. But we discussed why you should have your own idle in a state that's outside of blend tree. So here is how it looks when I add in all the walking. There it is. And now I'm going to add in all the running, and I'll show you how that looks. So here are 8 more motion fields, and there's all the running. So you can just copy that if you want, but don't copy it if you don't understand it. Please understand it. That's very important. But if you already know what's happening here, then yeah, there it is. This is how I have it laid out. You can see here's the preview of the motion here as I edit the horizontal and vertical values. Now I'm going to do the same thing too for the guarding while walking, running. Here it is. And that is working as intended. All right, so now we have this filled out. What do we do? I'm over here in the player network manager now. I'm going to make an else here after if we're not is two-handing weapon.value. So I'm going to say player.animator.setBool is two-handing weapon. And we're going to set it to, actually I don't need this else statement. We're going to set the animator is two-handing weapon status to whatever the new status is of the is two-handing, or the current status rather. So we're going to say is two-handing weapon.value. All right, let's save that. Now, if I go into the game here, you can see if I two-hand my weapon, there it is. I play the two-handed locomotion, and my shield goes on my back, so the animations are switching. If I block too, it's the same thing. I get the two-handed blocking animations now, no longer the one-handed animations. And I have a mistake here, so I'm going to change that. I knew I'd find one. Okay, there we go. Now it's working as intended. So yeah, every time you find a mistake with your animation transitions, it's probably going to happen because there's a lot of stuff happening here. Just go back and check the transitions. You can see the two-handed attacks aren't playing because we haven't added those yet, but we have all the two-handed locomotion and the blocking. And I can two-hand the weapon, and the offhand weapon goes to my back, or rather the on two-handed weapon. So what are we going to do in the next video? Well, in the next video, we're going to finish our two-man system by adding in all the attack variations. We're going to do that addition to our strength, and we're just going to basically add in anything that's going to complete this system. And obviously, if we add anything else in the future, like more actions, we'll have to come back and add on to it. But the entire framework of this system will be there in its entirety. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for joining me again. I hope you all have a very lovely weekend. As always, a massive thank you to my patrons. It's because of each and every one of you guys I get to keep producing this content, and I do love doing this. So again, thank you. You have my sincerest gratitude. I will see you guys next week when we get back here and we complete the two-handed system. And maybe then we're going to move on to equipment. I'll see what's up. If you guys have some other suggestions of anything you'd like to see before we move on to something like equipment, just let me know down below.